I will make a few announcements in a minute as soon as our participant list stabilizes just a bit. All right, so welcome once again to the Second Minds seminar. A quick announcement that the video of the first talk is now available on the website. The link to the website is available. The link to the talk is available on the website, and we will post that link in the Q&A, so you'll be able to access it. I would like to just talk about a few logistics things. So first, we'll once the talk starts, you're welcome to ask questions through the Q&A. We will be curating these questions and streamlining them. So for the first 10 minutes, we'll probably just be letting Thomas go on with his talk. But then after that, we'll allow some clarifying questions, and as long as we keep everything within reason. And towards the end of the talk, we'll do our best to answer all the questions that we get. Other than that, I'm very, very happy to introduce Professor Thomas Strohmer from UC Davis. Professor Strohmer's research is in applied harmonic analysis, numerical algorithms, operator theory, the mathematics of data and information. He's done work related to machine learning, signal and image processing, high dimensional data analysis. And his work tends to be extremely impactful, very highly cited. He's done some fantastic work on compressed sensing, on real world problems involving telecommunications and radar imaging, and as well as more recently, some influential work on phase retrieval, blind deconvolution, and related areas. He's won multiple awards, and on his request, I will keep this extremely short and turn it over to him. So thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Hello, everybody. Do you know that feeling when you're stuck in a relationship that doesn't really work very well, and it hasn't been working for quite some time? And yet, you know, you should have this conversation with your partner that maybe it is time now to talk about maybe ending it, or maybe you have to make some radical changes, but you're not having this conversation. You are postponing it, maybe because you're very busy, you might be just lazy, or maybe you and your partner had great sex the other night and think, no, it's really awkward to stop it right now. Or maybe the whole conversation makes you very uncomfortable and inconvenient, and so you're not having that conversation. And now you find yourself in this shelter-in-place, and all the problems you had in a partnership become even more pronounced, become even more problematic, become magnified. But you cannot have the conversation now, right? Let's get first through this pandemic. Let's first get through this, and then I will have the conversation. But you know deep down that if you don't have it now, you might never have it. Luckily for myself, I'm in my private life not in this situation, and I hope that neither are you. But in some sense, we all are in this situation right now. And my talk, in the first part, I would like to clarify what this situation is, why we need to have this conversation. And in the second part, I would like to prepare us for this conversation. But I would like to start with a little story, a true story, well, almost true, at least more true, whatever we hear from the White House right now. And this story is about a young couple. Let's call them Harry and Meghan. And you see Harry and Meghan, a young couple. Harry is working from home tonight. Can you see me now in full screen?
Yes.
Okay. So Harry, you see Harry is working from home today. And Meghan, his girlfriend, is downtown working on a project, and Harry is working from home. It's late in the morning, the doorbell rings. The smart doorbell informs Harry that there's a woman outside, a stranger. Her face does not match any of the faces in Harry's contact database. Also, the smart doorbell picks up that the woman arrived in a taxi with the airport shuttle on the side. So clearly the woman came right from the airport. Therefore, the smart doorbell informs Harry to not open the door and not let the woman inside. Harry opens the door and lets the woman inside, embraces her, and leads her in the kitchen. Harry and Kate, that's her name, sit down in the kitchen. Harry gets a bottle of champagne out of the smart refrigerator, and a few minutes later, they move in the living room. We learn from the smart TV that a little bit later, Harry and Kate are watching a romantic comedy with Hugh Grant and Jennifer Aniston in the lead role. Again, a little bit later, Harry and Kate move into Harry's bedroom. The smart bed tells us that there's some activity going on the bed. The thermostat, the smart thermostat, has a built-in microphone in the bedroom and records sounds of intense moaning. All this information gets fed into an algorithm by the good company, the so-called happy algorithm. The happy algorithm is part of a program that the good company, together with the government, developed. Happy stands for health, ambition, personal, and pandemic improvement. And it aims to make better citizens. So this algorithm has all this information. The algorithm also knows that Meghan is downtown. Therefore, the happy algorithm concludes that Harry is cheating on his wife right now. The happy algorithm concludes that Harry will lose 100 happy points from his happy score because of antisocial, anti-distancing. All this happens unbeknownst to Harry, who a few minutes later walks back into the kitchen, turns on his cell phone, which he turned off when Kate arrived. And when he turns on the cell phone, he receives a video message from the good company. Hello, here's your good company. Your girlfriend's birthday is coming up next week. Why don't you give her as gift this time something really great? Why don't you give as gift this very expensive, very beautiful diamond ring? It's beautiful, it's organic, it's vegan, and it's a special deal right now. Well, Harry wonders why he should buy his wife this really expensive diamond ring when he receives another video message from, hello, here's the good company. With us, you're always in good company. If you want to increase your happy score, you should consider donating $100 to the good cause. While Harry is contemplating why he needs to improve his happy score, we go to Meghan in her downtown office. Well, Meghan is finishing her project right now when she receives an alert on her cell phone. You know, Meghan signed up for this special alert, the Good Intentions program, that tells her when she or Harry lose a certain amount of happy points. And Meghan gets this alarm that Harry just lost 100 happy points. Now that makes Meghan a little bit worried because she knows that sometimes when Harry is working from home, he gets a little bit distracted late in the day and then he starts playing video games. And sometimes then he takes another, he has a bottle of beer, he has another bottle of beer, and it doesn't really work anymore. And that cost him sometimes 10 happy points. So Meghan checks with her smartphone the contents of her smart refrigerator. But to her relief, the 6-pack Corona beer is still untouched. Actually, it's been untouched for quite some time. So everything is fine. But wait a minute. She realizes that a bottle of champagne is missing. And she knows that Harry doesn't really drink champagne, and definitely not alone. So that makes her a little bit more worried. She checks the other appliances. The smart TV tells her that Harry was watching a romantic comedy with Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston is boring, Harry always says. So something is strange here. Then she looks at the log of the smart bed and she sees that there was some activity on the smart bed. Now Megan gets really upset. The built-in microphone in a smartphone tells us that she uses keywords like go to hell, you pig, and other things I cannot really use here, otherwise I would lose 100 happy points. And the built-in camera of a desktop computer picks up expressions of concern, of confusion, of anguish. All this is fed into the good deal algorithm of the good company. And Megan receives a text from the good company. Hello, Megan, your birthday is coming up. I think you should buy this time yourself a beautiful present. You should buy yourself this new surfboard from Roxy, which you can get for 10% off if you buy it right now. It will make you feel much better. Well, Megan wants to feel much better and buys the surfboard right away. Back at Harry's home, Kate finally comes out of the bedroom and joins Harry. Kate, you see, Kate is Harry's sister. She arrived today from Australia in the morning. Her business meeting in San Francisco got delayed. Therefore, she decided, oh, I will surprise my brother and arrive 2 days earlier than we agreed on. She comes to Harry's house. She is excited. Harry is excited, invites her in. They have a bottle of champagne together. But Kate has this major headache from her flight. You know, it was a very bumpy flight, very turbulent, and she has this headache. And she doesn't really like to drink champagne right now. Harry says, you know, I know when you have this migraine, maybe we turn on some TV, the background noise sometimes distracts you, and then, you know, the headache might go away. They watch a TV for a little bit, for a few minutes, but it doesn't work. Kate says, this headache is killing me. I think, you know, I have to take a nap. It's not really, not going away. And if I take a nap, it will be fine. And Harry says, of course, you're welcome, but don't use the guest bedroom. Please use my bedroom. It is quieter, it's darker, it's much more convenient. They move to Harry's bedroom. Kate sits down and she really has this painful headache. These sounds, however, are misinterpreted by the happy algorithm as sounds of ecstasy and not sounds of pain. It's clear that the movie When Harry Meets Sally was not part of the training data of the algorithm. In any case, Kate comes out of the bedroom, relaxed, headache is gone, very cheerfully says, hey, Harry, my headache is gone, how are you? Now she sees that Harry is very subdued. What's up, Harry? Harry says, well, you know, I just lost 100 happy points and I do not know why. What happened? Something is completely wrong here. And indeed, something is completely wrong here. And what is wrong here? This is what I would like to tell you now. So the talk, as I said, is in 2 parts, but the whole talk is not a mathematical talk. However, it has important consequences for mathematics. It has important consequences for us mathematicians working in data science or for data science as a whole. And I want to first point out what is wrong, and then I want to point out how maybe we can make things right. So what is wrong? Well, what is wrong is that there's a new economic system emerging that threatens our democracy and our social fabric. And it is actually amplified, this threat, in the current pandemic. It's getting even worse right now. And so we really cannot postpone this discussion that we should have had for a long time any longer. And this discussion involves, of course, machine learning, data science, AI, because these are the things that really drive this whole new economic system. And when I use AI, I want to point out I use it in a loose sense because we all know that currently there's no I in AI yet, but I just mean the algorithms that they're using right now. I call them AI. And what I want to point out in my talk is we need a new paradigm to resolve these problems that we're in. We need a new paradigm of what data is, and we need a new paradigm of how we conduct data science in the AI. And then I would like to point out what we concretely can do about this whole mess that we find ourselves in. But let me first spend a little bit of time on clarifying what mess I mean, how pervasive surveillance capitalism is. And now the light turned off. Let me see, it's not moving. It doesn't turn on again. I hope, yeah, no, it's back on. Sorry. The algorithm decided I'm not moving, so I need to get up from my chair. Great, thank you, good company. Okay, surveillance capitalism. I should point out right away that the problem is not with data science. It's not with AI. The problem is somewhere else. I know that there are dangers with data science and AI. I understand this. For example, one of those dangers is the massive job loss that we might face with AI. But this is not what I'm talking about today. I know this is a true challenge, and I think we will need it, but this is not the challenge I'm talking about today. This other challenge about AI is that the robots take over, and Elon Musk is one of these guys believing that. This is, of course, complete nonsense, and this is also not the threat I'm talking about. I'm talking about a much more imminent threat, a much more real threat, the threat that goes by the name surveillance capitalism. Surveillance capitalism is a term coined by Shoshana Zuboff. You may know her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And she describes surveillance capitalism, for example, as, and let me read that to you, the unilateral claiming of private human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. And I would like to spend a few minutes to highlight what she means with that and why this is so pervasive. I would like to continue with another statement by her. By providing free services that billions of people cheerfully use, it enables those providers of those services to monitor our behavior in astonishing detail, and usually it's without our consent. And this leads to an economic system which she calls the behavioral futures markets. So I would like to put some flesh behind all this now and put some details behind this. And I want to make clear, when I talk about surveillance capitalism, first, I'm not fighting capitalism per se. I'm not against business. I'm just fighting this version of capitalism. Second, I'm not talking about, well, if you enter search terms in Google, Google remembers this, or you post things on Facebook and Facebook uses this information. No, surveillance capitalism is much, much more massive. And I want to give you a few examples because we need to understand the full extent of the problem to really do something about it. Google is, of course, one of the key players in surveillance capitalism. And there's a whole list of things that Google does to invade our privacy, to spy on us. And they really mean spying in a sense of they hide what they do, they don't tell us, they obfuscate what they do it in secret, and officially they do something else. Let me just give you one example of this long list that Google is doing, because it's kind of fitting for right now. If you have an Android phone, you know that Google is tracking you all the time. If you turn off the phone, Google is still tracking you. If you take out the SIM card, Google is still tracking you. This Android phone is built that they can still track you even if you take out the SIM card. Google said, oh, we stopped doing that now and we didn't mean to. The whole phone was designed for that, but they didn't mean to. And you cannot opt out of tracking for whatever reason. And it's actually clear that Android itself was just designed to get access to our personal information. That was the real idea behind Android. Facebook is another serial violator of our privacy. There's again a long list. I'm not going through this. I just want to point out two things that Facebook does. Well, let me point out first one thing that Facebook cannot really do. Facebook does not have good access to your financial transactions, to the things you buy. This is something that Facebook doesn't really get good access to. Amazon has that, Facebook does not. Facebook has so much access to your personal life, but not your purchases. Therefore, Facebook wanted to make a deal with the major banks so that those banks sell all your purchases, your credit card statements, all this to Facebook. The banks didn't go for it. So what's the next step? Well, Facebook comes up with its own currency, sold as something that is good for you. Of course, it's not really taking off right now, but Facebook will push its own currency to get access to your financials. The other thing is, when Europe came out with this new privacy law in 2017, Facebook was under a lot of pressure from Cambridge Analytica, and Mark Zuckerberg said, oh, this new privacy law is fantastic, we embrace it, and even though in the US we don't have such a strong law, we will nevertheless follow this law in spirit. Until the law came out, all the non-US users worldwide were registered in Ireland and were falling under the European law, and in particular under Irish tax law. So that allowed Facebook to avoid paying taxes. Now, when this new law came out, Facebook secretly moved all non-European users under the US law. And the US privacy law is, of course, completely harmless. So Facebook said, oh, we embrace this new law, and secretly did the complete opposite. But it's not about Facebook and Google alone. Verizon tracks you. Verizon developed a new cookie that's so-called zombie cookie. You all know cookies, you know, they can delete them. The zombie cookie, you cannot delete. Well, you can delete it, but it reappears, it regenerates itself. You delete it again, the zombie cookie appears again. This is why it's called zombie cookie. But Verizon said, well, you know, we think it doesn't really do any harm because we do not believe that the information that we sell by gathering this information from the zombie cookie that we sell to other companies, we do not believe the other companies will use this information. We do not believe they will make profiles of you. If you think Verizon thinks their customers are stupid, listen what else they have to say. They said, this zombie cookie is good for you. It's beneficial for you because if by accident you delete your cookie, it reappears. If by accident you delete it again, it reappears. So it's a feature for you. You know, you're so stupid, you all the time you delete by accident your cookie, we make it reappear for you. That's a good thing that we do for you. If you have any app on your cell phone, on your smartphone, almost any app will access your data. For example, the Weather Channel will access your private data, your contact data, your emails, your videos, your photos, and send them to Facebook. You may say, I have no Facebook account. Doesn't matter. They will send it to Facebook. And almost any app does that. It has nothing, and here's the point, it has nothing to do with the function of the app. You know, the Weather Channel doesn't need to see your emails. It doesn't need to see your phone, your photos, right? It has nothing to do with the functionality of the app. So the most apps are designed to simply extract private information from you. And there's not much you can do about it. Hertz, for example, if you say, well, you know, I just want to get out of here, rent a car and drive away. Well, Hertz has installed cameras and microphones in the car, very carefully hidden. And the company says, well, we're not planning to use it, you see? Then they say, well, because we don't have the bandwidth yet. The point here is the companies tell you, this is really for you. We do it for you. It's for a better user experience. This is like a doctor-patient relationship, right? You give information, we give you better service. But this is not like a doctor-patient relationship because there's a lot of things that are very different. The doctor-patient relationship, there's a mutual trust, there's a dependency, there's a symmetry, and there's law, there are rules there. This is not the case here with these companies. And again, to be very clear, it's not what you post on Facebook, what you enter in Google. No, this is everything else you do online. When you go someplace, a camera sees you, your phone contacts, everything you do online in some way, even though it's not the service you intend to use, it will extract information from you beyond your imagination and usually without your consent and carefully hidden from you. Well, you might say, well, at least, you know, when I sleep, then nobody's interrupting me. Well, hopefully you don't suffer from sleep apnea because if you do, then again, you will be watched all the time. The information from the sleep apnea machine will be transmitted to drug companies, to health insurers, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can opt out. It doesn't matter. They will still do it. So your personal data while you sleep will still be transmitted to companies, and they can do whatever they want with it. Talking about medical data, the medical data, in a sense, the most private thing about us, right? In 2013, United Kingdom, the NHS, planned to sell all the patient data to drug and insurance companies. And you could not opt out. There were so many complaints they had to stop, but do not expect this to really stop. Right now, the pandemic is a good way to hide this intent and do this again. People in the US, you do not have to worry about it because the Supreme Court already decided your medical data are not yours. Companies can sell them in any way they want, okay? This is decided by the US Supreme Court. Your medical data are not yours. The most personal data you have do not belong to you. And I want to contrast here quickly industrial capitalism and surveillance capitalism. Industrial capitalism depended on exploiting nature and controlling nature. And without proper laws, we have, you know, severe consequences. Climate change is one of them. Surveillance capitalism, in contrast, but also in parallel, depends on exploiting human nature and controlling human nature. And I want to come to this control aspect in a moment. Because in the first phase of surveillance capitalism, it was about monitoring our behavior. In the second phase, we went beyond monitoring, and we're in the middle of the second phase right now. It's about behavior modification, about shaping your behavior, not just watching you, but shaping your behavior. Because why would they do that? Well, if I want to sell products to you or advertisement to you in a very targeted way, it's much better if I can predict your behavior. How can I best predict your behavior with the most certainty? Well, if I interfere in your behavior, if I shape your behavior, if I get you to do what I want, because then my prediction will be most accurate. When I can interfere in your behavior, if I can kind of modify your behavior in the direction that I want. So it's about behavior modification, no longer just observing you, monitoring you, but controlling you. And how do I do that? I need to get up close and personal to do that. It means I need to get in your home. I need to come kind of close to your body, wearables, smart home, Internet of Things are the things that drive this second phase of surveillance capitalism. Smart home is just a surveillance home, right? If you have a smart TV at home, you should know, and Samsung says this clearly, please be aware that if you have spoken words, you're in the living room, you say something, you have a smart TV in the living room, it's listening to you, and it's transmitting this information that it records to other companies. Samsung is taking this information that it records in your living room or in your bedroom, wherever you have a smart TV, sending it to third companies. Those companies send it to other third companies, and so on and so on. And Samsung says, that's not our problem, that's your problem. We just record it and send it away. It's your problem to figure out what all these other companies are doing with it, not our business. And another company that makes smart TVs, Visio, their CTO even says, well, if you buy a dumb TV, you have to pay more for the dumb TV. Of course, it can do less, but we make you pay more, because if we cannot spy on you, we're losing money. Therefore, dumb TVs are more expensive than smart TVs. If you happen to have a Nest thermostat from Google at home, and you really want to understand the privacy laws behind Nest, you need to review at least 1,000 privacy contracts. So I'm not saying 1,000 pages, but 1,000 different contracts. Because Google is sending the information it collects to third parties, which send it to third parties, and so on and so on. And nobody takes responsibility for sending it to someone else, what they do with it. So if you really want to understand the privacy laws of Nest, you need to review 1,000 contracts at least. And if you do not agree to all of them, you just disagree with a single one of them, you lose most of the functionality of this thermostat. And by the way, Google, when people found out that there's a microphone built in the thermostat and not listed in the text specifications, Google said, oh, this was just an oversight. We forgot to list it. And of course, we do not plan to use the microphone. I'll leave that to you to interpret that. If you have a smart vacuum at home, you should know that this vacuum that's running around on the floor and vacuuming your floor, make sure you're well dressed, because this vacuum is taking pictures while it is vacuuming your apartment and trying to sell them. The company sells right now, because when this came out, no, we do not plan to do that, but the intent was clear, and they probably will do again when this whole thing comes down. So make sure you're well dressed when you vacuum at home. So any kind of smart device, if it is a smart water bottle, a smart scale, they're spying on you. Smart kids toys, smart adult toys. And I know it's tempting to make some jokes here now, but it's actually really disturbing, I think. But we are not really completely without fault here, because we give our friends surveillance devices for Christmas, right? Packed into neat shapes like Amazon's Alexa, cute names, Google's Home. These things, it's clear that they're spying on us. So if you have Alexa at home, it's listening into you all the time. And the argument from Amazon is, well, if you want to wake up Alexa, right, with the keyword, hey Alexa, then it needs to listen in. But what they do not tell you, this could easily happen on device. It's very easy to build a simple chip that listens for this keyword on device, and only when you hear this, when it hears this keyword, then establishes an internet connection. It doesn't do that because companies do not want to do that. They want to listen in all the time. So this is by design a surveillance device. Amazon, of course, has a lot of patents in that direction. So if they listen in, and now the light went out again, but I think we'll leave it like this. They listen into what you say, and if they hear certain keywords, they can use this, also combined with facial expressions, maybe they get from your computer, and offer you certain products that would fit your current state of mood. Of course, companies claim they care a lot about privacy. It's mainly their own privacy they care about, though. When shareholders wanted to get more information about how Google and Facebook invade privacy, both Zuckerberg and the Google owners, Page and Brin, voted down these shareholder proposals because they have the majority, they easily can do that. So they do not want you to know what they're really doing. Of course, they care about privacy because Mark Zuckerberg, for example, when he bought his big house in Hawaii, the very first thing he did is he built a wall around it, a big high wall against hundreds and hundreds of years of customs that you have to have access to the beach. You don't build these walls. He did it anyway because he wants privacy. So his future is private, yours is not. Well, you could say, but there are privacy policies, right? We have privacy policies. What about them? Well, let me tell you, if you have a fitness tracker, and those fitness trackers that do not have privacy policies, 76% of them share sensitive information gathered from you with third parties. If you have a fitness tracker with a privacy policy, this number goes up to 79%. So your privacy policy is really worth nothing. Now, let me skip this, but continue with, I talked about behavior modification. So they try to come up close to modify your behavior. Let me give you a simple example of this behavior modification. Pokemon Go was a cool game a few years ago, a big hype. You know, in Pokemon Go, you had to hunt for treasures, virtual treasures, somewhere out in a city. And when you found this treasure, you got points. In truth, Google guided people to businesses, mostly, you know, like Starbucks and other businesses paid for having these treasures placed in their business. People would go there, and of course, business would increase. So that was a way to modify your behavior. If you thought you played Pokemon, no, you got played. Facebook has a way to ensure that you stay with a certain brand. For example, if you often buy Nike shoes, but you start watching advertisements from Adidas shoes, Facebook has a way to send you news feeds while you watch this Adidas commercial, news feeds that make you upset, that change your mood into something negative. That means next time when you watch Adidas, it will be associated with a negative mood. And let's say with Nike, they show you both positive news feeds. So they can influence your mood in this very subtle way and establish a kind of brand loyalty. There's a program, you know, it's called FB Learner Flow. So you can buy into this as a company. They modify, they manipulate your mood in a very subtle way. China, of course, does it on an even different scale, the social credit score. And China says this social credit score, it allows those that are trustworthy to roam freely under heaven, while making it hard for the discredited to take a single step. So you give us control, we give you freedom. We measure what you buy, which video games you play, how patriotic you are, and you give us all that, and then we give you freedom, or not. You think this just happens in China, you need to understand the vision that is behind these big companies. Zuckerberg said, Facebook wants to provide a future that works for everyone and fulfills personal, emotional, and spiritual needs for the purpose and hope and moral validation. Schmidt, the former Google CEO, says, I actually think most people do not want Google to answer their questions. They want Google to tell them what to do. So you have to understand this thinking is very different from what you might think they're doing. They have a vision of the world where they tell us what is good for you. And of course, in order to make that work, you have to give them control. If you now wonder, how could this happen? How did we end up here? How did they get away with it? Well, the first thing is they are operating mostly in a legal vacuum. There are hardly any laws to do that. So they embrace this unrestricted, unregulated internet. It's really important for them. The second thing is they operate by misdirection. They misguide, well, they simply lie about what they're doing. And the other important thing is they say, if you want to live in a digital world, this is what you get. It's unavoidable. It's not avoidable, right? You lose your privacy when you go digital. They want you to believe that there's nothing you can do. So what do we do now? Because there's something we must do. First, as I told you, machine learning is really, and AI is really behind this. You know, all this data collection at scale only leads to useful products because of machine learning and AI. As many of us are working in these areas, well, is this what we want? Or do we want to be machine learning and AI used for something better, to address actually the needs of society? So how can we save AI from surveillance capitalism? Here's the thing, we need to understand the underlying conflicts. We need to understand the mechanisms behind this. And we need to understand what role data plays really. What is data? We need a new paradigm of what data is. We need a new paradigm of what machine learning and AI is in this bigger context. And this is what I want to do now. I want to develop this new framework of data science. And for this, I need a different worldview. I need a worldview of dialectics of aporias. And here I'm drawing from two people I learned a lot from. Gerhard Schwarz, a philosopher, Herbert Pitchman, a theoretical physicist. And now you might say, well, these two guys cannot know anything about the real world, right? It turns out they both work a lot in conflict management. They work with little groups, they work with companies like Deutsche Bank, Mercedes, they work with states, they work with tribes, they work with the military, they even work with the church. So they know about conflict management. And the point here is that different types of conflicts that we need to distinguish. There are logical conflicts, right, wrong, either or. This is the one type of conflict. For example, I could say, you get the best cappuccino in the world in Italy. This is a right-wrong conflict. Of course, we all know it's right. And if you don't believe it, then I'm sorry, you're wrong. But this is just a right-wrong conflict. That's very easy. But many important conflicts are not right-wrong conflicts. They do not fit in this logical scheme. And they fall under this framework of an aporia. So what is an aporia? That goes back to to the Greek philosophers. In a nutshell, an aporia is an unsoluble, it's a paradox. An aporia is a paradox. A more precise definition would be, in an aporia, you have two contradicting statements, okay? You have two contradicting statements, but both statements are true. They contradict each other and they're both true at the same time. So there's no right or wrong. And moreover, these two statements depend on each other. One statement is true if and only if the other is true. This is truly a paradox. And understanding surveillance capitalism with this framework of aporias, you will see, will make things a little bit clearer for us, what's going on. And this concept of an aporia, of course, is well known. Niels Bohr, for example, said, the opposite of a fact is a falsehood, but the opposite of one profound truth could be another profound truth. So he talks about aporias here. To give you one concrete example of an aporia, we can look at the aporia between freedom and order. I could say order preserves freedom, and it's definitely true, or order destroys freedom, and it's also definitely true. This is an aporia. There are two contradicting statements, but both are true at the same time. In this case, it also works the other way. I could say freedom preserves order and freedom destroys order. Well, again, two contradicting statements. They're both true at the same time. And so how do we resolve this conflict between freedom and order? I want more freedom. You have to give you up order. No, I want more order. How do I manage this conflict between freedom and order? Well, in this case, I can describe it in a little bit more detail. The correct solution of a freedom-order conflict would be autonomy. So we're not striving here for compromise, but for consensus. Autonomy would, from the Greek, means freedom gives itself order. Okay, autonomy means freedom gives itself order. And I should point out, if you have such an operatic conflict, if one side wins in a conflict, both sides lose. Okay, so an operatic conflict, if one side wins, in the long run, both sides lose. And they will illustrate this in more detail. And another thing is an operatic conflict, if you find a solution, it's not permanent. You have to kind of reclaim it every day, relive it every day. It's part of life that we have to do that. Talking about of life, Hegel said, something is living insofar as it contains a contradiction. And you may recall Hegel's dialectics, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It fits perfectly to describe this nature of conflicts. Freedom would represent, for example, thesis, order would be the antithesis, and then autonomy would be the synthesis. It's the resolution, the resolving this conflict in a true consensus, not a compromise. The two parties give up something, no, a true consensus. That's what autonomy would do. But it's not how it usually works in practice. So therefore I want to describe in more detail how these conflicts are often resolved in practice. You have two layers here. You have the original conflict between freedom and order, and there you have this positive effect. This is where the creative thing happens. This is the true aporia. But let's say I'm for freedom, and I want to push for more and more freedom. And I say, I don't accept your orders, no orders at all. I just push for more and more freedom. I end up with arbitrariness, I end up with chaos. That's what we call in conflict management. I fall into the shadow of freedom. It's chaos, arbitrariness. On the other hand, if I'm for order and I say, no, I need more and more order, I need to define exactly what freedom means. I need to describe it really, really more, very precisely. I need to control it. I move to strict control. Then I'm falling to the shadow of order. And now I have this conflict between chaos and strict control. And this is no longer an aporetic conflict. This is a logical conflict. This is not a true conflict anymore. Here you have only negative effects. And in particular, let's say I'm for freedom, I push for more and more arbitrary freedom. I end up in arbitrariness, in chaos. What happens in real life is all of a sudden chaos switches to strict order. You have seen it very often, right? You have a revolution and all of a sudden what you have is strict order. Or if you are for order and you push for more and more order, you end up with strict control. You have a revolution, things fall apart, states disintegrate, and you end up with chaos. So if you're for order, and you think you get to order by pushing for more order and removing freedom, you end up with the complete opposite that you wanted. So the enemy of order is not freedom. The enemy of order is strict control. The enemy of freedom is not order. The enemy is chaos. Another conflict is public-private. You have the aporia between public and private, and you have the extremized versions when you fall in the shadow, that's between unrestricted and secretive. So if I extremize private, I push it further and further, I end up in the secretive. If I push public further and further, I end up in the unrestricted domain. And the statements are like, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. When people talk about private, they actually push it into the secret mode, okay? You have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. This is not a private argument, it's about a secret. This brings me to the dialectic nature of data, trialectic nature of data. Data can be really understood only in this context of trialectics. There are three dimensions of data that are really important for us here. And data as identity and rights is one dimension. The other dimension is data as knowledge, information. And the third dimension is data as a product, as a business. Let me describe these three areas in more detail. And I use medical data as an example. It works for many other cases too, but medical data, I think, is a good example right now. My medical data are very personal, say something very personal about me. They're part of my identity. And since they're mine, of course, there come rights that are directly associated with it. So medical data come immediately with personal rights. But medical data also give us knowledge. And in particular, when I look at medical data across many people, I get additional knowledge. If I make my medical data public in some form, I can get much more information out of it. So data, medical data, represent clearly knowledge. But medical data also present the product, the business. You may get a vaccine out of this information that you get. You may get some prediction models out of this, or you may get some advertisements out of this, right? It's also a product. So product is an important part of this whole thing. Product is important. Data as a product is an important element, an important dimension of data. But why do I have these yellow bolts between these areas? Well, the point is these three areas each of the two areas stand in a dialectic relationship to each other. So data as rights is in a dialectic relationship to data as product. Data as product is in a dialectic relationship to data as knowledge, and then we have a third dialectic relationship. And this is what I call trialectics, a term that I borrowed from Gerhard Schwarz, because you have this trinity of dialectic relationships. But here comes the interesting part. It's always the third area that acts as a synthesis to resolve the conflict between the other two areas. This is really the key here. Data as identity acts as a synthesis between the conflict between data as knowledge and this product. And so on. It works for all three areas. And let me explain this in more detail with the aporia. Let's take data as identity and data as knowledge. These two statements stand in contradiction to each other. For example, my health data are private. I'm not sharing that. This is something very private. That's my identity. The knowledge guy might say, well, we only get insight from health data when they are shared and analyzed across communities. So this is in contradiction to data being private identity. What resolves this underlying conflict is the product that I get out of it. If I produce a vaccine, then this is good for my own health. And if I'm a knowledge guy, then the only justification that I get from accessing all this data is because a product comes out that does something with this data, gives me a product that's now useful for the people. So it's a product as a synthesis of the conflict between identity and knowledge. And the key here in all this in the surveillance capitalism is we need to balance these three areas. We need to carefully balance them. And how to really balance them? Well, we need to understand these conflicts between them, not logical conflicts, but operatic conflicts. Let's look at it from the viewpoint of the current coronavirus. First, you should know that while
Thomas, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So there's a shadow sort of, I guess, problem with any of these three concepts as well. Is that true?
Yes.
If I push for knowledge too far, for the sharing everything just for the purpose of knowledge, what's the problem that results from that shuts itself down at the end?
I think it's gathering databases for everyone for the purpose of gathering data, whatever you misuse them afterwards, but it's no longer knowledge, it's just measuring everything, right? Every little thing you do needs to be measured. Internet of Things could get knowledge, but Internet of Things could fall into the shadow where you just get data about everything.
Okay.
So kind of push it to the extreme that everything needs to be measured, everything needs to be monitored, right? We need to, in a way, complete control. Only then do we have enough knowledge and information about you or about a process. It doesn't have to be a person, right? It could be a community. It could be some physical process.
All right, thanks.
And so I want to illustrate this now with the coronavirus. And I want to point out that while we are busy dealing with corona, you should know that companies like Facebook and Google are lobbying the California lawmakers to withdraw or modify the current privacy law that California has since 2020. California now has a very strict privacy law, much better than any other state in the US, comparable to Europe, even stronger. And while we are distracted, Facebook and Google try to get rid of this law or modify it to make it harmless. So this is something that happens on the side. They've done it before. And now, as we're distracted, they try to do it even more. But now they found a different reason to do it, right? Because now they repackage their surveillance systems that we should use for tracing as a public good, right? So they have every reason now. You cannot have these privacy laws right now, right? Well, it's not a good time. And even more, they put on, the kind capitalism hat and say, this is all good for you. This is your social good, right? We do that for you. And you have to be careful here because if you accept these explanations, there's a form of mission creep. It really can pave the way for more and more surveillance capitalism. And as I said, testing, tracing, separation, I fully understand it's important. But you see how this slogan, how this dynamics plays out in the public now, in the newspapers. You see things like, oh, if you want to have health, you have to give up your privacy. We can only beat COVID-19 if you give up your civil rights. So the conflict they present to you is a false dichotomy. It's not about health and privacy. This is not the conflict that we're really looking at. They say, if you want to have your freedom back, you need to give us control. But this is not really the true underlying conflict. It's not about health and privacy. And of course, Facebook and Google, they say, well, you just trust us with privacy. Of course, if you trust them with privacy, it's like trusting the oil companies with the environment. And based on their record so far, whenever they had a chance to violate privacy, they did. So in this case, we talk about tracing. We have to mistrust them as much as we can because they will abuse it. And they have done it before. So just naively hoping, well, this time, you know, it's a pandemic. They cannot abuse a pandemic. No, they can. And they will, and they have done it before. So we have to be careful we're not entering a forced impact here. Because remember China's social credit score? You give us control, we give you freedom. Remember Facebook's kind of glorious vision of the future. We want to fulfill all the spiritual and emotional needs of your life. You just give us all the data. We will do it. Google Smart City falls in the same context. You give us complete control of everything, and we will give you nice housing, good traffic flow, all that. We give you freedom if you give us control. But you remember from this conflict, freedom and control do not go together. Freedom and order go together. What they want is control. This is not freedom that you get at the end. And so I want to be very clear, when they talk about public, what they really mean is unrestricted. So the argument with public and private, they usually push it to unrestricted versus secretive. You often hear things like that, and that's another statement from Eric Schmidt, who said more or less, well, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. If you do something you don't want other people to see, you shouldn't do it in the first place. Well, I personally have plenty of things to hide, but this is again the wrong argument. It's not about secrecy, it's about privacy. And we have to understand that we have to really understand the underlying conflict. So what do we do? What do we as society do? What do we do as data scientists do? Again, it's not about, you cannot say, well, if you go online, you have to expect that there's nothing you can do. This is wrong. Of course, there are many things you can do, but companies want you to believe that there's nothing you can do. If you're online, you give up privacy. That's not true. But if you believe it, of course, that works in their favor. In the same way, it's not true that you have to choose between health and privacy, not even in this pandemic. There's a big desire, there's a whole business model behind making us believe that, but it's simply not true. So what we need right now is a bill of data rights. And yes, we have to have this conversation now and not later. There are many things that need to go into this, but for us data scientists, I want to point out that also changes how we think about machine learning, how we think about data science. And for us mathematicians, it must be clear that data science doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in this bigger context. We cannot isolate ourselves and say, well, I'm just developing this clustering algorithms. I don't care about anything else. No, we need to care. And we are actually the right persons to address this. For time reasons, I will skip that part, but how do we take charge again? What can we do right now? Well, the first thing is, I really want to point out, we need public outrage. We need to stop just being okay with it. Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. No, there's plenty of things we can do about it, and we have to start now. I mentioned the Bill of Data Rights. We need to engage our lawmakers and tell them this is not okay. We need laws, we need regulation. In understanding of this aporia conflict that freedom and order and private and public go together, and we do not want to push things into control, but sometimes we may have to. Concretely, we need to understand this new paradigm of what data is. We need to understand this trialectic relationship in which things happen. We need to balance these things carefully. Very concretely, you could say, well, I don't use Google anymore. I use DuckDuckGo, for example. A search engine that works really well. It has done great in the last years. It was not good 2 years ago, but now it's really good. You could request privacy laws like California has. If you live in any other state in the US, it insists on having those privacy laws. You could take your private data back. There are startup companies now that offer that for you. I'm not involved in any of those, but for example, Jumbo Privacy, the good company that does these things of taking back your data, at least to some extent, for you. You could run your iPhone not on Android or Apple iOS, but on EOS, privacy preserving, protecting system for smartphones. And we need to develop a whole system of a new economic alternative system, you know, as an alternative to Amazon, Google, and Facebook. But what for you as a data scientist, what does it mean? Well, you have to become a trialectic data scientist. You have to understand that you play a trinity role here. As a data scientist, you're also a trustee. You need to care about identity and rights of data. Of course, you're a researcher that gets knowledge. And you also shouldn't forget, in a way, you're also producing something, or colleagues of you may produce something, so you're also acting as a businesswoman or businessman. And keeping this, you may say, well, I'm just a researcher. That may be okay, but you need to understand this bigger picture. You know, as a medical doctor, for example, I may not fulfill all these three things, but at least you need to be aware of them. And a good doctor knows that in medicine, you also have this underlying trialectics, and you don't need to fulfill all these three areas. And famous medical doctors like Eric Topol, if you read his book, he understands it very well. He doesn't use this term trialectic, but it's exactly what he describes is the balance between these areas. Very concretely, what research areas, for example, would be helpful? Well, privacy-preserving machine learning is one of them. Synthetic data is another one. You know, synthetic data are kind of like the real data, but they're synthetic. They mimic the real thing, but they're synthetic. They protect privacy completely. They model the statistical properties of the real data, just they're not real. And this is mathematically very challenging. It's a great area of research. On-device machine learning is another way. Well, if you're really a genius, fast algorithms for homomorphic encryption. So Alfonso, here's your next project. In general, you should also think about getting involved in this, making products out of your data science, you know, developing this alternative ecosystem. And that leads me to the last point. Internet promised us decentralization, democracy, right? That was internet was all about. It will lead to empower everyone and, you know, the freedom of the internet. We don't have the freedom of the internet, we have the unregulatedness of the internet. There's no, you know, it's the arbitrariness. And what happens when you move from freedom to arbitrariness, you know, to the chaos, it switches over to strict control. And this is what we have right now. The internet is under the strict control of a few companies. And now the digital revolution does the complete opposite that we wanted it to do. It's not decentralized, it's a concentration of power. And instead of social trust, we now use algorithmic certainty. All this leads me to my final point, the much bigger picture in all this in my talk. In the whole millions of years of humankind, there have been a handful of revolutions that really changed the way we live. And I'm not talking about the French Revolution. I'm talking about the fire revolution, for example. When humans discovered fire, how to use fire, how to tame fire, it completely changed the way they live. It changed the way they could generate heat. It could change the way they defended themselves. It changed the way they produce food. So it completely changed the entire way of living of humans. The Neolithic revolution is another example. When people discovered agriculture, it changed completely the entire way that people lived. You know, they moved from a nomadic lifestyle to a sedentary lifestyle. The whole cultural belief system changed. We may be in another revolution of this type right now, the digital revolution. Maybe it's one, maybe it's not, but if it is one, there's something special about it, really special. It will happen within a few generations. And that means we're in the middle of it. And what we do really has impact. It's not a revolution over millions of thousands of years. So what we do right now matters. That's a great role to be in as a mathematician. Maybe not why you chose to be mathematics or in statistics and computer science, but what you do right now really matters. And you can choose in a way with what you do. Do you want to have a digital revolution that benefits a few companies, a few CEOs, and some totalitarian regimes? Or do you want to have a digital revolution that benefits everyone and the planet? It's up to us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for this very stimulating talk, asking difficult and well, timely questions, I guess. I'm going to start off the Q&A with a question of my own. We are right now in a crisis, as we all know, and these questions become even more important in a situation like this. So I guess my question is, how do we square certain apparent contradictions in the framework that you posted, such as the Koreans having success with their contact tracing program, which happens to also be on the limits of invading one's privacy and broadcasting one's actions to the entire community, with also privacy preserving and all the other concerns that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, first, I don't have the answer to everything, but here it's clear. One thing is clear, I'm not against the tracing, but I'm certainly against handing it over to Google and Facebook and Apple and believing that they will do the right thing. This will not happen, right? I mean, we got screwed over all the time by them, and believing that it will not happen right now would be completely naive. And there's no excuse for believing that, right? So if we engage in some form of tracing, it has to be done very carefully with very strict conditions, and we cannot just hand it over to those companies. Of course, they say, oh, we will observe your privacy, but history has shown they don't, right? And we also have to be very careful that it doesn't prolong, that it has to be limited to a certain time. The danger is that it paves the way for us being okay with it. And many things that have happened after 9/11, many laws that were temporary are still with us, right? So many of these laws that the government is allowed to spy on us in some form, they're still here. These temporary things have a way to linger. So we have to be really, really careful and very alert. Developing the tools for privacy preserving machine learning fast enough for the tracing right now is probably unrealistic. But on the other hand, I think it's still a good reason to start right now, right? Because who knows, maybe there's a third wave coming, and then we want to be ready at that point. And understanding, again, it's a conflict between public and private, and not between secretive and unrestricted. So understanding the conflict in the right way doesn't give you a solution right away, but at least you aim for the right solution. That's, I think, important here.